For more than 2 centuries, a powerful secret has been quietly woven into the foundation of American history. It is a secret guarded by wealthy families, elite institutions, and polished public narratives. A secret that explains how many of America's most influential dynasties first accumulated their wealth. Names like Roosevelt, Astor, Forbes, Perkins, Russell, Cabot, and low names that dominate museums, universities, and political history. These names appear in textbooks as symbols of success, philanthropy, and the American dream. But behind their glamorous legacies lies a truth rarely spoken aloud. These families built their first fortunes not through innovation, not through hard labor, not through noble enterprise. They built them by smuggling opium into China during the 1800s. This was not a small operation or an isolated moral failing. It was a massive, organized, industrial-scale drug empire. An empire that destroyed millions of Chinese lives while enriching a small circle of American merchants. The profits were astronomical, generating returns of 400 to 500% per shipment. Entire American fortunes were born from these voyages that sailed under flags of commerce but carried the weight of addiction. Meanwhile, China's society, economy, and military strength began to fracture under the spread of opium addiction. Western powers, including the United States, watched China collapse and saw opportunity, not tragedy. As China suffered its century of humiliation, American fortunes flourished like never before. The roots of American aristocracy were being firmly planted in foreign soil. And today, the evidence still exists, quietly stored in archives, manifest logs, merchant letters, and company ledgers. Evidence that tells a story far different from the heroic version taught in American schools. A story that exposes the real origins of power and wealth in early American society. And a story that powerful families worked very hard to keep out of the history books. To understand how this happened, we must step back to the global economy of the early 19th century. China was the world's greatest exporter of tea, silk, and fine porcelain products in enormous demand across Europe and America. But China refused to buy Western goods, believing them inferior and unnecessary. As a result, silver flowed steadily out of the West and into China, straining Western economies. Britain, desperate to reverse the flow of wealth, searched for a product China would buy. They found it in opium grown in British-controlled India. The drug was illegal in China, but its addictive hold made enforcement nearly impossible. Once smuggled into port cities, opium spread rapidly through all levels of Chinese society. Addiction grew from a nuisance into a national crisis. Yet Western merchants saw only rising profit margins. American traders soon joined Britain in the lucrative trade, eager to claim their share. Their fast clipper ships were perfectly suited for evading Chinese patrol boats. American crews learned the coastline, the hidden coves, and the safe anchor points used by smugglers. They established networks with Chinese middlemen who rode out at night to receive shipments. With every exchange, silver left China and flowed into American hands. American merchants reinvested their silver into more ships, more opium, and more influence. Meanwhile, China weakened as addiction hollowed out its workforce and its military readiness. What emerged was an economic imbalance no longer based on trade, but on addiction and exploitation. The opium trade became one of the most destructive forces ever unleashed on a sovereign nation. And American families were deeply involved from the first shipments to the final chests sold. By the 1830s, opium addiction had spread to nearly 10% of China's adult male population. Opium dens filled city alleys, rural villages, military barracks, and merchant districts. Productivity plummeted as addiction drained the energy and health of millions. Chinese families pawned heirlooms, farms, and property to buy more opium. Silver, the backbone of China's economy, flowed out so rapidly that inflation soared. Corruption increased as officials were bribed to ignore shipments. Local militias weakened as soldiers became dependent on daily doses of opium. Even government scholars, once symbols of moral purity, fell into cycles of addiction. China's leadership saw their nation falling apart and searched desperately for a solution. In 1839, Emperor Daoguang appointed Commissioner Lin Zexu to lead a massive anti-opium campaign. Lin confiscated over 1,000 tons of opium from British warehouses in Canton. He destroyed the drugs publicly, hoping to send a message to foreign traders. But Britain responded with military force, launching the First Opium War. British ships, armed with modern cannons, easily defeated China's aging fleet. China was forced to sign humiliating treaties that opened ports to Western traders. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain, marking the beginning of foreign control in China. American traders took advantage of the chaos to expand their operations. The Second Opium War forced China to legalize opium entirely, unleashing even greater destruction. Through it all, American families quietly accumulated enormous wealth from China's suffering. And this wealth returned to America, disguised as a legitimate success. One of the most significant beneficiaries was the Delano family. Warren Delano II began his career in China at 19 years old. He quickly rose to partner status at Russell & Company, the largest American opium firm. The company supplied, transported, and distributed opium across southern China. Delano oversaw deals, negotiated prices, and coordinated shipments with British suppliers. He returned to America a wealthy man, wealthy enough to live like royalty. When he later lost money in a financial panic, he simply returned to China to make another opium fortune. His wealth directly financed the upbringing of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR grew up surrounded by privilege purchased with drug money. He attended elite schools, had private tutors, and entered politics with family backing. Yet as president, he signed strict anti-drug laws, never acknowledging the origins of his family fortune. The Astor family followed a similar path. John Jacob Astor, often celebrated as America's first great landlord, began as an opium smuggler. His ships carried Turkish opium into Chinese markets in exchange for silver. Astor reinvested his profits into Manhattan real estate, becoming one of the richest men in history. His descendants founded the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and shaped New York culture for generations. The Forbes family also built their empire on opium. Robert Bennett Forbes captained opium vessels delivering chests to Chinese harbors. His brother, John Murray Forbes, used the profits to build railroads and invest in industry. Their descendants later founded the globally influential Forbes magazine. The Perkins family, revered in Boston high society, funded schools and hospitals. Yet their early wealth came from opium trafficking in Turkey and China. Their charitable institutions erased any mention of this toxic legacy. The Russell family not only dominated the opium trade, but also helped found Skull and Bones at Yale. The secret society became a breeding ground for presidents, senators, and intelligence chiefs. Its origins, tied to opium wealth, were quietly hidden. The Cabot family, another pillar of the Boston Brahmin elite, also engaged in the China trade. Streets, libraries, and scholarships bear their name, but not their true history. The Low family rose to prominence in New York from opium profits as well. Seth Low, a descendant, eventually became president of Columbia University. Columbia's Low Memorial Library was financed by money earned through the suffering of millions. Together, these families built the backbone of American aristocracy. Their wealth funded foundational industries, universities, and political networks. But their pasts were carefully cleaned by generations of biographers and historians. Their reputations were polished until only the noble parts remained. The opium connection faded from public knowledge. And America's powerful families emerged looking pristine, honorable, and patriotic. Yet beneath the surface, the truth remained unchanged. Their fortunes were rooted in the destruction of another nation. And that fact cannot be erased, no matter how many museums they fund. Over the next century, these families expanded their influence across American society. They entered politics, banking, and education, shaping national policy and public culture. Their money funded campaigns, newspapers, and academic programs that reinforced their narratives. They became philanthropists, donating to universities and charities across the country. Yet these donations often came with conditions control over how history would be written. University archives were edited, sanitized, or quietly reorganized to remove incriminating details. History textbooks highlighted their generosity while ignoring their role in the opium trade. Museums displayed their portraits, but not their shipping records. Biographies celebrated their business achievements, but left out their drug profits. Over time, the American public forgot the origins of these families' wealth. The opium trade became a footnote, then a rumor, and eventually a myth. Meanwhile, China never forgot. The opium wars are a central part of Chinese national education. Every student learns how Western powers, including America, use drugs to weaken China. They learn how addiction spread through villages, cities, and entire provinces. They study how China was forced into unequal treaties at gunpoint. They understand how Hong Kong was taken and why foreign powers gained control. The century of humiliation is taught as a foundational lesson in Chinese identity. But in the United States, almost no one learns these events in school. The contrast is profound. China remembers every wound. America remembers nothing. American classrooms often skip from the American Revolution to the Civil War. They rarely mention America's involvement in the opium trade. When the Opium Wars are taught, American participation is minimized or ignored. Students grow up believing America played no role in the tragedy. Meanwhile, the descendants of opium families continue to hold power. Their names still appear on university buildings, scholarships, and public monuments. Yet the origins of their wealth remain shrouded in silence. Generations of Americans have walked through institutions built with drug profits without ever knowing it. And generations of Chinese have grown up remembering how foreign powers exploited their nation. This imbalance in historical memory continues to shape global relations today. Many misunderstandings between China and America stem from these unspoken wounds. The scars of opium are still visible in Chinese culture, politics, and education. And the wealth built from those scars is still visible in American institutions. The story binds the two nations together in a way neither side fully acknowledges, but silence does not erase responsibility. And forgetting does not heal the damage done. It only delays the moment when truth must finally be confronted. The evidence remains preserved in countless archives around the world. Researchers who dive into these documents encounter the full truth firsthand. And their findings reveal a chapter of history too important to ignore. These documents include shipping manifests, company ledgers, correspondence, and merchant journals. They describe transactions in meticulous detail: weights, prices, ports, and profits. They reveal the names of captains, suppliers, investors, and partners. They show how American firms coordinated with British traders to maximize profit. They include personal writings where merchants casually discuss addiction as a business opportunity. They reveal that these traders fully understood the devastation they were causing. But they viewed that devastation as the cost of doing business. They justified their actions by claiming that if they didn't sell opium, someone else would. This mindset allowed them to continue even as millions suffered. The documents also show how American merchants reinvested their profits. They bought ships, built railroads, and established foundations. They funded universities that would shape future generations. They purchased political influence, shaping the laws that govern the nation. Ironically, many later supported strict anti-drug policies. Policies that punished addiction domestically despite their own history of fueling addiction abroad. The hypocrisy is staggering and undeniable. It exposes a fundamental contradiction in American moral identity. A nation that condemns drug abuse today was once enriched by selling drugs to another country. These uncomfortable truths are rarely discussed, but they remain essential to understanding American power. Because without the opium trade, many American dynasties would not exist in their current form. Without opium profits, major universities would lack key buildings and endowments. Without opium money, political families would have had far less influence. Without opium wealth, America's early industrial expansion would have looked very different. This is not an accusation. It is a documented historical reality. And yet, for generations, this reality has been hidden beneath patriotic narratives. But history cannot stay buried forever. As researchers publish more findings, the truth becomes harder to deny. The opium chapter of American history is slowly resurfacing. And with it comes a new understanding of how global power was truly built. This story forces us to re-evaluate the myths of American exceptionalism. It demands that we recognize the darker foundations beneath today's institutions. It encourages us to question the narratives we have long been taught. And it challenges us to confront the full truth, not just the comfortable parts. History is not just a collection of victories and accomplishments. It is also a record of mistakes, injustice, and exploitation, and ignoring those parts does not make them disappear. In fact, it allows them to repeat in new forms. Understanding this chapter helps us understand the present. It reveals how wealth, power, and influence flow across generations. And it reminds us that nations are shaped as much by their hidden actions as by their public ones. Today, the buildings, libraries, and monuments funded by opium wealth still stand proudly. Their marble columns and engraved names tell only half the story. But history has two sides, the side that is celebrated and the side that is buried. For the families who profited, the buried side was an inconvenience. For the millions who suffered in China, it was a tragedy that reshaped their nation. The truth is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Because only by acknowledging the past can we truly understand the present. The opium trade was not just a historical footnote, it was a global turning point. It fueled Western power, weakened China, and altered the course of world history. It built fortunes that still influence American society today. And it left scars that China still remembers clearly. We cannot change what happened, but we can choose to face it honestly. We can choose to tell the full story instead of the convenient one. We can choose truth over silence, transparency over myth. Because history belongs to everyone, not just those who benefited from it. And the lessons of history matter only when we are brave enough to learn them. If this story opened your eyes, share it so others can discover the truth that was hidden from them. Let more people understand the real origins of American wealth and influence. And join the effort to bring buried history back into the light where it belongs. Because only when the truth is spoken can healing and accountability finally begin.